This is The Last Laugh. I'm Matt Wilstein from The Daily Beast, and today on the show, he directed pretty much all of my favorite movies, including his very first feature, This is Spinal Tap, in 1984. 41 years later, the whole crew is back for Spinal Tap 2, The End Continues. Rob Reiner, welcome to The Last Laugh.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's so great to have you here. Spinal Tap 2, you've made so many films in your career. This is your first sequel. What do you think about that?
Yes, it is my first sequel, and they never wanted to do it. We were asked over the years, you should do a sequel, you should do a sequel. Now, at first, nobody even knew what the heck this thing was. People thought it was a real band. Then they asked me, why would you make a movie about a band nobody ever heard of? You know, but over the years, it caught on, you know, and it went into the Library of Congress's National Film Registry. This goes to 11, is in the Oxford English Dictionary, and people would say, come on, do another one. We always felt, no, this is it. We've done it. You know, we're not going to be able to do better. And over the years, this is the truth now. We made no money. We never made any money. I mean, there were DVDs.
Yeah, I saw you made like 82 cents each or something.
No, 82 cents a piece. Oh, with all the DVDs and the videos and the things. Nothing. And Harry Shearer, who plays Derek, he's decided to, sue and get the rights back. And we did. And then we sat around. We said, well, do we want to do it? What are we going to do with this? And then we said, nah, we won't do it. But then we met again a couple of times. And then a very natural thing came out, which is the guys themselves had not played together for 15 years. And we thought, wait a minute, why? Is there bad blood? Are they not talking to each other? That became the basis of the film. And once we had that, we had a story to tell, because you can't do it unless you have something that works as a standalone. And we wanted to make sure that this film, even if you haven't seen the first one, would work. And then we played on the fact that there's all kinds of bands that are playing in their 70s and their 80s. You got the Rolling Stones, you got the Eagles are out there, you got Oasis is back together. I saw the other day, Roger Daltrey is up there singing with, Pete Townsend for the Who. So that made sense. We wouldn't just make it up out of whole cloth. We had to have the antecedents in real life. Which is what we did with the first one.
I watched both the original film and the new film over this past week, so it was great watching them sort of back to back. And there's a line that stood out to me from Harry Shearer's character in the original where he says, I'm going to paraphrase, but it's something along the lines of, do we really want to be doing this when we're 45? Which is pretty funny considering where everybody is now. I think he's the oldest of the bunch. He's in his 80s now, Harry, and everyone else is in their 70s. Yeah. So how did the age of everybody open up new avenues for comedy that didn't exist when you were making the first one?
Well, I mean, you go with the old jokes. I mean, you do, I made the joke the other day, which is the Tap, even though they're now in their 70s, and you just pointed as Harry in his 80s, they haven't grown musically or personally. And one of the promoters in the thing talks about that. The only thing they might have grown is maybe some skin tabs or something, but it's basically the same band, that's just what they do. So, but you can always make fun of it. And the promoter suggests that in order to, secure their legacy, maybe one of them should die
on stage,
which calls the Elvis effect, and it'll up the sale of their albums, and there'll be a good documentary. And so they go through a whole thing. But we do trade on what it is to be old and still playing rock and roll. It's interesting. You mentioned, he said, we're going to be farting around the stage when we're 45. When I was a kid in the 60s, I was a teen, I grew up in the 50s and 60s. There was a sentence that we said, it was a saying said, never trust anybody over 30. That was a thing because everybody was making music and they were young. And so now they're old and still.
What did you think of that saying once you reached 30?
I realized nobody was going to trust me, and maybe I should up the age. And that's, by the way, the thing you'll find out. You're a young guy, but as you get older, you keep saying, well, maybe I should. Now I'm looking for a 9. I'm 78 now. I'm looking for a 9, at least a 9 somewhere. I don't have to be 100, but a 9 would be good. If I make it that far, I'll be happy.
When you made this film 41 years ago, the original, you were all in your 30s, I believe. It was so unique. This mockumentary style hadn't really been seen in a movie and improvised in this way. Christopher Guest, who's your collaborator, went on to really perfect that style, I think, in some of his movies, Waiting for Guffman, Best in Show. So I was curious, having made the original, directed it, then 40 years go by, you make this one. What was different for you working with him, maybe learning from what he had developed in these other films in the interim?
Well, I mean, all the Chris's films were done at Castle Rock. Those were, art films that we funded.
Yeah, so you were a producer on those.
Oh yeah, no, Chris, I've known Chris for a long time, and that's form that we, like you say, he mined it in a great way. But the difference is I shot Spinal Tap in 1982 actually, and I had one camera, and it was a 16 millimeter film camera. It had 10 minutes of film in it, so you had to change it. Now we're digital cameras, and I use 2 cameras, and you can go for an hour. So, I mean, you can keep doing it over and over again. So that part of it changed. But in terms of the look of the film and the way the film is done, I had to think two things. One is, I'm Rob Reiner making a film, but it's also Marty DeBurgi's film. So how much has Marty DeBurgi learned? How is his filmmaking improved? And my answer was none at all. The guy is stuck, just like the band. He can't, he hasn't learned a damn thing. So he does what he does.
I'm curious about what you feel like the key is to playing a great straight man, which I think you do in these films. Your father, Carl Reiner, was also a legendary straight man, especially with Mel Brooks. So, I think especially you think about something like the iconic Goes to 11 scene, which you mentioned. You're really, you're playing the straight man. You're teeing up Chris Guest. How do you go about that? What's your strategy for those improvisations?
Well, it's very interesting that you mentioned my dad, because my dad was a great straight man to Mel Brooks and the 2,000-Year-Old Man. George Burns was a great straight man to Gracie Allen. It takes understanding timing and understanding what you're doing with the person who's going to get the laughs to be able to get the laughs. One of the things my father would do, and he was the best at it of anybody, is when he could push Mel into a corner where Mel didn't know where to go, it would fire off in Mel's head something that would come out unexpected, that you wouldn't expect. And I did that with Chris in that scene where, he shows me the amp and he shows how it's 1 louder and it goes to 11. And I said, well, I don't understand. Maybe why wouldn't you just make the top number a little louder and make that, not have it, just make that number 10 go a little louder. And he, you can see, is stumped. He doesn't know what to say. And that's where the comedy comes. That long pause before he says, well, this goes to 11. I mean, he didn't have an answer. And that to me is what works, right? And I learned that from my father.
New film, was there any moment similar to that you felt like there was a moment of surprise or something that you just didn't know was going to happen, that you had those?
Oh, plenty of those things. Because it's unscripted, it's unscripted. We improvise the whole thing. So when Michael McKean, as David St. Holmes, and 2 things he got me on: Night of the Assisted Living Dead. I didn't know who he was, and in Winning a Holdie, he writes music for when you're on hold on a phone. He says, that little music, I want a holdie with that. And that got me, that got me.
This film for you is really, I feel like, a return to really straight comedy after much more, dramatic political work that you've done later in the later part of your career. Is that just happenstance? Did you feel like this is what the country needs right now, is a hard comedy like this?
No, I don't think in those terms, although I do agree that we need to laugh now more than ever. I mean, but that's not why we did it. I mean, we did it because, like I say, we had a story. We had a story to tell. And I got to say that the first one and this one, there's emotion in it. There's emotion in both of them. And it's not a normal satire and emotion don't like to be with each other. They're contrapuntal. They bump up against each other. But I felt that if you're gonna tell a story, and if it's just a straight satire and it doesn't have any kind of emotional ballast to it, it's not as satisfying. And so I found that the relationship between David and Nigel, and the fact that they knew each other from the time they were little kids and they had this bond to each other, they're like brothers, that was the basis for where conflict could come. And so it's in the first film. And in the second film, I think it's even more because when you get older, those emotions run even deeper. So it was important to me to try to marry those two things, and I hope I did. So, yep, it's mostly a comedy. I mean, there's a lot of laughs, but you got to have that emotional component, I think.
It's not a very political film like some of your other ones, except for one Stormy Daniels reference that I caught. But you and I have discussed politics, several times over this past decade. So I kind of wanted to take a minute just to take your temperature on how you're feeling right now. I mean, things are changing so much every day, every hour. How engaged are you in the news day to day? Have you had to tune it out? Are you just as engaged as you always were?
Yeah, I read the New York Times, the headlines. I can't read too much past some of the headlines because it's really disturbing. I mean, for those of us, my wife, her mother was in Auschwitz and she lost her entire family there. She was the only survivor. My Uncle Charlie was part of D-Day and fought in 11 major battles. My second father is Norman Lear, who is another big figure in my life. He flew 52 bombing missions over Nazi Germany, and millions of people died so that we wouldn't have what we see happening now in America. And that is a very disturbing thing. And make no mistake, this is where we are right now, and we have to become aware of it. And what do we do about that? Well, we have to do whatever we can. And so I'm trying to push back as best I can in ways that I know how. And hopefully we can preserve democracy, because it's a 250-year experiment that has, in fits and starts, improved itself. I mean, there was a time when women couldn't vote. Now they can. There was a time where black people couldn't vote. Now they can. There was we had a black president. We've been flawed, incredibly flawed, but we've moved forward. We continue. This is the first time I'm seeing this thing that is so difficult to hold on to, that is so ephemeral, being destroyed in less than a year. And the vestiges, they say, well, all the institutions aren't holding. Well, the institutions only hold if people agree that the rule of law is important, that the Constitution is important. If we don't believe that, then you can do whatever you want. And that's what's happening now. So I'm hoping we'll survive this. And if we do, it's going to take a long time to rebuild the shining city on the hill, the beacon to the rest of the world. You go to outside of our country, and I've been out in the UK and other places. They don't know what the hell's happening in America. They don't understand what's happening. This used to be the place that welcomed immigrants, that welcomed people, and it was our strength. The diversity was our strength. And now it's looked upon as people are being thrown out of the country without due process. It's nightmarish what's happening in America. And hopefully people will be able to see that. Unfortunately, voters, they only feel when it hits them personally in the pocketbook. But when they feel that, which they're going to start to feel, and they also feel their rights being taken away, it may start to change things. But hopefully, it's not too late. It's as bad as anything could be in this country at this point. The hope was, if we could have one country that allows people from all ethnicities, colors, religions, sexual preferences, all living in one place, it would prove that the world can be one. That John Lennon talks about in Imagine. It could prove that. And this was the experiment. This was the place we were going to do it. And right now, it isn't happening. So let's see.
One place that used to be very outspoken was Twitter, which is now, of course, called X. I believe you deleted your account after the election. You got off of Twitter, like a lot of people did. Was it just the re-election of Trump that did that, or was there something that made you think I have to stop doing this?
No, it wasn't that. It was when Elon Musk bought Twitter, turned it into X, and it became a platform for this kind of authoritarian point of view. And at one point, I tried to get back on. I had like 2.5 million followers. It's not that. I mean, it's some, but, and I got off. I got back on. I tried to get back on, but I couldn't use my name because they had taken it. So I called myself the actual Rob Reiner. I mean, something like that. And so from 2.5 million followers, I went to like 100, 98. I mean, and it's, but there's other ways to do this, and
I did notice every time you would post something political, you'd have about 100, trolls responding, calling you meathead. Which is something that stuck to you for a long time.
I was happy when they called me that. I mean, it went from there to libtard, and then from libtard, it went to pedophile.
Yeah, so it can get a lot worse than
you're on Epstein's island, and it's like, wow, wow.
So you mentioned, Norman Lear, the creator of All in the Family, who you've talked about as a mentor. I think he really pioneered this certain way of using both comedy and entertainment, but also his celebrity to promote a political message. What did you learn from him about being outspoken and saying what's on your mind, not being afraid to speak out?
The very thing you're saying, which is you can use your fame or celebrity, whatever, if you have something you want to get across, a policy issue that you want to highlight, or you want to try to see if you can push forward, you can marry those things. But you have to listen. I'm going to be called these things no matter what, but there was never a time that I went on to talk about either early childhood or marriage equality or environment that I couldn't answer fifth, sixth, seventh tier questions, because I'm going to be tarred as a celebrity, and show that and dribble or whatever they say. But I can go on with Tucker Carlson. I can go on with Laura Ingraham. They can't stump me. Because I've worked in government. 7 years I was up in Sacramento running a commission. I know how policy works. I know the intersection between policy, politics, and programs that push a policy forward. You can't ask me a question that I'm not going to have the answer to. So you can call me whatever you want, but I'm going to know that I know what I'm talking about. And listen, I had a good conversation the other day with Jane Fonda. And Jane, Jane has a certain reputation too. And she said something that was very, hit me, which is during the 50s, there was McCarthyism. And there was a contingency in Hollywood that pushed back on it, because Hollywood, people were being blacklisted and couldn't get jobs. And there were people that formed a group to push back on it. Her father, Henry Fonda, was part of that. And she said there has to be something where we can galvanize people who are famous, because you get attention. They can criticize you, but you get attention. Look at Donald Trump. He's got all the attention in the world and doesn't know what the hell he's talking about. But you can get attention, and maybe there's a way that we can harness that to start pushing back on autocracy and fascism. And we haven't figured that out yet, but hopefully we can.
So several years ago, I had the great honor of meeting you and your father, Carl Reiner, together at the Chinese theater ceremony where you dipped your hands and your feet there. And I remember you joking about that you should have dipped your bald heads in the cement, but I guess they didn't let you do that. But I think I told you this at the time, but I wanted to tell you again that you each made a movie that is not only among my personal favorites, but is very personally important to me. My wife and I, our very first date, we watched The Jerk, which is your father's movie. And then long before that, the first movie that I ever saw in a movie theater when I was 3 years old was The Princess Bride, which had a huge impact on me, even as a 3-year-old, and then continued to be one of my favorites to this day. So talking about that movie, I mean, it's still such a perfect film to me. Did you expect it to endure like it did? I mean, like Spinal Tap, to have as many quotable lines and pieces of the culture in it.
No, you never know. When you make a film, you don't know what's going to stay and what's not going to stay. I was in All in the Family. There were young people that never heard of this show. They don't even know what it is. And this is the biggest show that was ever on television for 5 years straight. And 40 to 45 million people watched it every week, and they had to watch it when it was on because there was no DVR, there was no tapes or anything like that. So, you never know what's going to last, and things will last for a while, and then even those things go away, So you have to do something that you like, that you enjoy doing, and you like the process, and whatever happens to it, happens to it. But 3 years old, I'm curious, weren't you scared by the rodents of unusual size?
Terrified. Yeah, traumatized. It was that was tough, but I stuck through it, and I stayed. But yeah, that was a challenging one, I think, for my parents as well. On that film, on Princess Bride, it was scripted. It was based on the book and everything. But I imagine there were things that you found while you were shooting. Is there anything that comes to mind of a moment of comedy that you found on the set while you were shooting it? Maybe that was unexpected in some way?
Well, I mean, the performances to me is what made it great. I mean, Billy Crystal, what I love about Billy is, well, first of all, he's really funny. He plays Miracle Max, but he gives you some freebies, which you're not expecting. I mean, in the scene where he's trying to, bring Wesley back to life, and he says he's mostly dead, and he says, I know. He said true love. He says no. He said to blave. He said to blave, which is to bluff. And, he says but he says true love is the most important, is the best thing in the world. And then he says, a side of an MLT, a mutton, lettuce, and tomato sandwich, when the mutton is nice and lean. That's all improvised. He comes up with this. That got me. It's not in the script. And he also says at the end, have fun storming the castle. But he says, don't go in for swimming at least an hour, a good hour. Those are all Billy. He improvised a lot of stuff in there, and those all got me.
One other one that I wanted to touch on was When Harry Met Sally, which I feel like is also just one of my favorites and such an iconic film. For me, I think what really makes it transcend other rom-coms is how it includes both the male and female perspective really in even measure, and that's really because of the way you made it with Nora Ephron, right?
Yes, I mean, it's an idea I had based on the 10 years of a single life that I had after being married for 10 years and making a complete and utter mess of my dating life and getting in and out of relationships, not knowing how I was ever going to be with anybody. So I knew my experience, but from the female perspective, I happened to mention, I was having lunch with her, and I happened to mention I was thinking about this. She says, oh, that's an interesting idea. Maybe I would, get involved. So when we started working on it, I knew I needed a woman's point of view, and I had her point of view, and she brought her experience to the table, and it was really, she's Meg Ryan, an extension of Meg Ryan, and I'm an extension of Billy Crystal. I mean, so it's really about the two of us, our experiences as men and women, and we've kind of pushed that through the characters.
So now it's time for our segment called The First Laugh. So I'm going to ask you a series of questions, going all the way back to your childhood. The first piece of comedy that you remember making you laugh really hard as a kid growing up?
It was either the Three Stooges or Laurel and Hardy. Those, I used to laugh at that stuff. And I remember my father one time saying to me about the Three Stooges, what's funny about these guys? There's such morons. I don't know, but it's so base. When you're a little kid, those are physical things you laugh at. So I remember laughing at them, and I remember laughing at Laurel and Hardy.
I like the idea of you rebelling against your father by embracing the Three Stooges. That was like, yeah.
Yeah, no, he was like, what do you like about these guys? They're terrible.
His comedy was more intellectual, I guess.
Well, he did satire. They were doing, pretty much very sophisticated satire.
What about the first time that you knew that you were funny, that you could make other people laugh?
God, I don't know. I can tell you, this is after that, but I can tell you when I was 16, I always looked up to my father. I mean, I thought, and especially 2,000-Year-Old Man, when he did with Mel Brooks, to me is as genius of comedy as you're ever going to see. And I came up with an idea for a joke when I was like 16, and I was so nervous to tell him, and I told him it was about the derivation of applause, and they were down in the living room working on their routine even for the Ed Sullivan Show or Hollywood Palace, one of those shows, and I came in, I said, listen, I got an idea, I think it could be funny. It's the derivation of applause. And they said, well, what is it? I said, well, in the old days, like when, you'd see somebody and you'd like it, you'd go, oh, boy, is that good. Wow. And he says, if somebody's really good, you could kill yourself. He said, so there was one guy, Murray, he was looking around, and when he pulled his head out and like this. And he said, and then he brought it down here, and he says, that was a derivation of applause. And they put it in. They put it there, and then they used it. That was a big deal for me. But that was 16. I'm sure I made people laugh before that. Mm-hmm. Oh, I can tell you. I was 8 years old, and I was Norman Lear's daughter, who was the same age as me. I was teaching her how to play jacks, which is a game with a metal objects and a ball you throw up in the air and you try to grab the thing. And I'm teaching her how to play. And I'm told this because I don't remember it. Norman Lear says it was hysterical. He was laughing so hard in the way I was explaining how to play this game. And he tells my father, he says, your kid's really funny. And my father, all he saw was this sullen kid. I was always quiet and sullen. That kid's funny. No, he never saw it, but Norman. So I guess I was like 8 years old when I met him.
That was like your first audition. It worked out.
That was a big thing for me to do.
Really, yeah.
He hired me later, and
he made your career.
Yeah.
You were among the very first Saturday Night Live hosts, episode 3 of season 1 in 1975. You,
correct,
of course, didn't know what that show would become when you did that. But what do you remember about doing it when you think back on it now, 50 years later?
Well, the two things. The one is I met Alan Zweibel, who I've now, I've been good friends with him for 50 years, whatever. He was assigned to me to work on the opening monologue, that we did. And that was the best thing that came out of that for me. And then the other thing was my friend Albert Brooks, who was, my best friend in high school. And he actually was asked by Lauren at one point to be the permanent host. And he was the one who suggested, you should have different hosts, have a guest.
Yeah, that was a good idea.
It was a good idea, and that was the thing. But he said, I want to make films. He wanted to make films, and he made a bunch of six short films. They were all supposed to be about 6, 7, 8 minutes. One of them was 13 minutes long, and Lauren didn't want to put it on. And I fought for it because I was hosting it, and I said, no, you got it. This is my friend, and you got to do it. And it's a brilliant piece. Albert basically comes out and says, I've always wanted to perform open heart surgery, but I never got good grades in school, so I could never become a doctor. But I decided, I took an ad out in the paper. And people like me, they answered the ad and they, wanted to perform open heart. And then people said, yeah, Albert, I'm a big fan of yours. Whatever you want to do is okay with me. And so it's a whole movie about him learning quickly to figure out how to perform open heart surgery. It's hysterical, but it's 13 minutes long. And Lauren didn't want to put it on. And finally, I fought, and he finally agreed because he was right. You can't be away from a live show for 13 minutes. So he broke it up with a commercial, and it was like 6 and 7 minutes or whatever. So that I remember and they were flying by the seat of their pants. We cut a sketch in the middle of the show because we were running long, and they've got it now down to much, much smoother.
When you look back at your career, is there anything that you said no to that you were offered or that came up that you now look back and say, oh, maybe I should have said yes to that one?
No, I never had that. Most of the things I generate myself. The only thing that I felt bad, I would have liked to have done was Rain Man. But I was working already on When Harry Met Sally, and I was working on that. And I thought, because Sidney Pollack, I think, was originally supposed to do it, and he dropped out, and they were looking for somebody. And listen, Barry Levinson, who was also a good friend, did an incredible job. Did, a job probably better than I could have done. But that was something that I thought, oh, that's kind of interesting. But I never felt bad about it because I was already, starting to work on When Harry Met Sally.
On the flip side, is there anything you said yes to that you now think, ooh, I could have said no to that one?
No. Oh, the only thing was a commercial. I directed a commercial for Coca-Cola. Not that I love Coca-Cola. I drink Diet Coke every day of my life. But I don't like making commercials. But they offered so much money that I said, okay, I'll do it. And it was only a day shoot, but I don't like doing this. This is not fun for me.
That didn't become your side career.
That was the only thing that I regretted doing.
You obviously, you grew up with so many people who are, are comedy heroes and people who you knew from a very young age. Do you remember the first time that you met somebody who you really felt like was your personal comedy hero and getting to meet them for the first time?
Well, the first time I met Mel Brooks, I was very young, and I was only 4 years old. So I didn't know that he would become a comedy hero. You don't know. All that I knew was we had a little place in Fire Island, and my father told me, because Mel was a writer on the Sid Caesar show, and my father told me, well, there's a man, because we were going to sleep, me and my sister, who was 2 at the time, we were going to sleep at night. And he said, there's a man who's going to be coming visit. He's coming later. So when you wake up in the morning, if you see the man, don't get frightened, because the man is going to be in this little window seat area where he was going to sleep. I was okay. So now me and my sister, I'm 4, she's 2. We come in, and there's Mel Brooks sleeping in a window seat. And this is what he hears. Is that the man? Yeah, I think that's the man. Yeah. That's the man. Yeah, no, that's the man. That's the man. And he wakes up to these 2 little kids, 4 and 2, going, are you the man? Are you the man?
That's great.
So that was the man I met. That's the first part.
The last question that we ask on the show, is there a story or memory from your career that makes you laugh now, but really was not funny when it happened?
Oh, God. Wow. That's a good one. No, I don't. Well, not really. No. Not really, because I don't regret any of the things I did.
It doesn't have to be a regret necessarily, just something that you felt like wasn't good then, but now you're able to laugh at it.
I think my whole career, to be honest with you.
It's a struggle in the moment, and then later you look back and feel differently?
No, I don't have those kind of things. I don't. I mean, listen, it's a struggle to do all the things we do. We fight and we work and thing. And I don't look back and laugh. I look back in relief. Like, oh, that's over,
Well, you've had a pretty incredible career, and I can't wait to see, I know you're working on something else now, and I'm excited to see that. And I love the new film, and as a huge Spinal Tap fan from way back, it was very exciting to see this new film. So thank you, Rob, for doing this. And
thank you. Thank you for talking with me. I mean, I hope I didn't go on too long about the state of the country, but it's true.
It's important too. All right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Nice talking to you.